Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Creation Myths. I am Dan. I'm the host here, and joining me tonight are my two friends, Grayson and Zach, and we are going to talk about a genuinely awful video from AIG Canada. I'm just waiting to make sure that everything looks okay on my end on YouTube. The sound seems okay, but chat, as always, let me know if there's any problems with the sound or the video at any point, and I will do what I can to fix it. So before we go any further, before we pull up this clown from AIG, Grayson, you are fresh off an encounter with our mutual friend, Mr. Kent Hovind. Other than that, what have you been up to lately? And take a moment to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Grayson Hawk. I have a YouTube channel dedicated to generally being enthusiastic about science and history and debunking and debating pseudoscientists like flat earthers and young earth creationists. So that's where I overlap with Dan and Zach here, is that we all debunk young earth creationists on YouTube, and we have a great time doing it. I'm really excited to be here tonight. This video is particularly awful, and I can't wait to get into it. Like you said, I just got finished debating Kent Hovind last night. That's the final time I'm ever going to talk with that guy. I've successfully burned that bridge, and I'm happy to say that, yeah, he got very, very mad at me in that debate and compared me to Hitler. So I'm going to take that as a compliment, considering who the source. And yeah, check it out if you haven't. I also do debunk videos. I'm preparing a debunk video as we speak that's going to drop later this week. So yeah, check it out if you like science.
Link down below, folks. Both links down below. Zach, hi, welcome. How have you been? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm happy to be here. My name's Zach Hancock. I'm an evolutionary biologist. I specialize in population genetics. If you're familiar with my channel, we do a lot of pop gen. I'm also really into the history and philosophy of science. And as my co-host here, I'm also into debunking pseudoscience, particularly creationism. And yeah, I'm excited for this one. This guy really gets under my skin, so I'm excited to give the reasons why.
It's so bad. This video is so bad. Somebody, mutual friend of ours, posted this video, and all of us, like moths to a flame, were just like, this is worse than usual. This is particularly egregious. We need to cover this one. By the way, Zach, I just want to say I tell my students about you because one of the things I cover in Gen Bio 1, we do a little bit of population genetics, just scratch the surface a little bit. And my students, they'll ask questions that get just like a little bit deeper than what we do in class. What we do in class is just like one step beyond Hardy Weinberg. Like, it's not a lot, but it's like just a little bit, just a little pop gen, just a little taste. And when the students ask questions about like, well, what about this? So it gets more complicated. We start, and I can kind of explain, a little bit of it, and then. And I say, like, if you're going to get really into this, you got to like really like deeply appreciate the math. Like, population genetics is, for biologists who love math. Like my friend Zach, let me tell you, this is a man who loves math and will happily, joyfully take 30, 40 minutes to derive an equation and just love every second of it. And it's just like,
I've only made a few videos where I've derived equations on boards. But so I like to think of my channel as basically taking like thinking about evolutionary theory for those that really want to dig in a little bit more, right? Like maybe you've got some basic bio, maybe you've taken some intro bio courses, you've seen a lot of sort of the introduction evolution stuff, but you want to know just a little bit deeper. And so I try to really kind of push my audience to bear with me through the math, because
it's great.
Believe it or not, evolutionary theory is a mathematical discipline. It's a mature science, and all mature sciences are built on mathematics, and evolutionary theory is no exception.
And I always love when like the students have this moment of like, you're just futzing with the numbers and something clicks and they go, oh, and then X, Y, and Z. And you're like, yes, that's the next thing. You should take genetics. Right. It's like, okay, good. We did it. Now we're ready to do the next thing.
I have to say, I recommend Zach's channel all the time when I'm talking to creationists, and they just clearly express that they don't understand population genetics or how any of this works. And like, yeah, Zach's channel can get a little technical, and I do love watching his more quantitative lectures. But he also has like he conveys it well to a lay audience as well, so you won't be totally lost on like a lot of his videos. And it's really good for helping to understand population genetics, because so many people don't understand how mathematical, like there's actually equations that can describe population genetics. People don't even understand that. They're like, wait, equations in biology? Like what? And so like, yeah, he does great work. And I just want to say one more thing is that I said all three of us do debunking on YouTube, but I just got to say there's two of the people here, not me, who actually also do debunking in like published academic literature, which is such a huge to the whole field. Because I've cited the paper that you guys co-authored about genetic entropy.
Yeah.
Like, it's been awesome to like add that as like something I can pull out of my back pocket when I'm talking to these creationists. And I have you two to thank for that paper. So like, thank you for not just keeping this as some sort of, you know, layman thing on YouTube, but you actually did the science and published it to help move this debate forward. So thank you.
The time Zach got so offended by creationist genetics, he wrote a paper.
All the best things I've ever done in life were done out of spite.
Just so angry. Just all right, folks. Let us pull up the video. There's the reason why we are here tonight. Oh man, this is
what evolution is supposed.
Be quiet. See, he can't even help himself. Just immediately. All right, so this dude is this is Calvin Smith from Answers in Genesis. I almost said California. Answers in Genesis, Canada, and surrounded by books. What is going on here? Right away, just what is happening? This is a man who cannot finish a book in his life. Just piles of books with bookmarks in the books.
And like these are stacked very haphazard. Like he looks like he's in danger of any moment.
Yeah, that one on his left is about to fall over.
Right?
Yeah. I mean,
it's like you think, oh, what do smart people make videos with? Oh, smart people have libraries because they read books. And so, hey, yeah, usually people have libraries and bookshelves. But let's go one step beyond that. Let's just stack all the books to literally encapsulate me when I make this video.
And I like that they're all like facing away so that you can't see what most of these books are, because I guarantee you most of these books have nothing to do with evolution or probably nothing to do with science, right? Like they're just random books turned away so you can't see to try to make him look smart. Yeah.
It's just literally a prop. Like
by the way,
I had this bookshelf before I made my YouTube channel. I've read these books. Like this is clearly like these are props. Nobody's reading these books.
By the way, folks, this is going to be a petty stream. Oh yeah. This
is a petty video on their part, actually.
So it's fair. Okay, let's do first. We're going to do like the cool little intro, and then we'll get into the actual content. But I love how AIG. I don't know if they do this for all. I guess they do for all their stuff, but the Canada one, they have like a little trailer, and then they have the rest of the video. So here we go.
We understand what evolution is supposed to be and to be able to do. It's just that none of the things that evolutionists point to as evidence for evolution actually accomplish what evolution is supposed to. None of these examples ever create anything new. They just demonstrate either reshuffled varieties or broken and damaged versions of what already existed.
What?
Why?
I don't really get this particular shot. Are we supposed to be the dogs? Like,
I think what they're saying is that if evolution was real, dogs should have evolved to be able to run business meetings by now. But in reality, our dogs haven't evolved, and they're just broken and lying in hospital beds because all mutation is only destroys.
I thought he was like, scientists, look, they're stupid, and like
that's
I thought
what
it was like a slap at us.
I thought we're supposed to be the dogs. Yeah, I think this is scientists talking about science. These three dogs, these are us, is what I think. Yeah.
So then the dog that's like all broken, laying in the hospital bed, that's the scientists after they get done with this video debunking evolution, right?
I have no idea what to make of this.
Hey, they're about to debunk evolution in 20 minutes. I mean, I can't wait.
Nobel Prize incoming.
One of the most common comments posted as a rebuttal to any one of our articles or videos is probably the statement, "You just don't understand evolution," which of course is not really an argument, but simply an ad hominem to the man fallacy that most often isn't really worthy of a specific response. However, to be honest, I have seen situations in which some fellow biblical creationists make statements that indicate they aren't particularly familiar with the exact mechanisms or nuances that evolution-believing scientists or even the average evolution believer might hold to. For example, one of the most common I've seen is the question, well, if we evolved from apes, then why are there still apes around? Thrown at evolutionists dozens of times and often with much gusto, as if the Christian believes that the question is such a zinger for the naturalist that it sounds as if the questioner expects the person to drop to their knees and accept Jesus on the spot. You see, evolutionists don't believe we evolved from apes. They believe we evolved from a common ancestor.
Nope. That's already wrong.
I just want to say he has so much contempt for his own audience here. Like, he literally just described them like they're idiots. I mean, like, yeah. He's insulting people right there. He's like, oftentimes people on my side say this stupid thing with much gusto. It's like, dude, have some respect for your audience. Like, you can say that they're wrong without portraying it this way.
He's the embodiment of smug. Like, he is just smug embodied.
Yeah. And this is very much the AIG thing, right? We're the only ones doing this right. Everybody else, bad at this. Compromisers, losers. We alone are doing this correct. This being creationism. Also, what he just said was wrong. The thing about apes, it's not that we share a common ancestor with apes, it's that the common ancestor of all apes was an ape and we are descended from that common. It's just like basic little language things. Just get it right. Just get the little things right.
Both apes and humans. Of course, when you ask them what that creature would have resembled, they will most often say it was an ape-like creature. So, the thin slicing that's often involved in these respective explanations can be a little tricky for the average layperson to sort out. Regardless, the evolutionists have an answer to that question, which is why I tend to cringe a little when I see it lobbed at a skeptic, because it typically elicits an eye roll or a face palm and reinforces the notion that creationists just don't understand evolution. And often with the implication that if they did understand it, they'd believe in it. However, I have also observed that many evolution-believing lay people...
Zach, did you want to...
I do and I don't. This particular article is from a Forbes. It's from a Forbes article, and it's an interview with a physiologist named Dennis Noble. That, believe it or not, I have a script for this. There will be a video in the near future on the third way of evolution. Debunking Dennis Noble. It's like 20 pages at this point. I'm trying to not make it too big and too wild.
We've been waiting for it, Zach. I've been waiting for your takedown of Dennis Noble.
He is the most frustrating character on YouTube right now to me. Like, every single podcast that he comes on gets like 100,000 views, thousands of comments. People are just in love with him. But if you ask most evolutionary biologists who he is, they don't know. Like, he is not a character in our field, and yet he has somehow made a gigantic impact on like the public's perception of evolution. So yeah, he's we will be dealing with him in depth in the near future, but that's where this evolution may be purposeful and it's freaking scientists. That's the headline for the Forbes article interviewing him. Yeah, it's absolute nonsense.
Nice. I've been looking forward to somebody tackling that specific interview. So thank you. I appreciate that is coming up. I can't wait.
And even scientists apparently don't understand what evolution is or is supposed to be either. Many times when critics show up to criticize our content, I will often post this.
I just want to appreciate, there was one tiny little comment there that I just wanted to highlight because it's so perfect. And it's that one that's just fading in right there on screen. Calvin's ego and bank account keep growing.
Legendary.
And that is so true. Raccoon 6072. Truer words. Spot on, whoever you are.
Besides our content, I will often post a simple statement evolution has never been observed, which often
Who wants that one? Who wants to do that one?
Yeah, well, there's been plenty of observations of speciation, which is macroevolution, which is what he's saying has never been observed. So, like, there's like hundreds of observations. It's just that he has never observed the straw man of evolution, which he says would be required to prove evolution. Like, they build up a straw man and then they say, nobody's ever observed my straw man, so the thing I'm straw manning must not exist.
Yeah, he defines evolution in such a way that it can't possibly be observed, right? It's like, well, show me a microbe turning to a man. Oh, you can't? It's never been observed, right? Like, well, you defined it in such a way that it just literally can't be.
Yeah. Remember, this is somebody who studied evolution in depth, my friends. So, I mean, his definition.
But then the very first step that he should have gotten was the definition.
Oh, he'll say the definition. And then he'll say that's not the definition.
He just disagrees with the actual definition that's accepted by evolutionary biologists. And he says, I reject your definition and substitute my own. And then my own definition is nonsense and not provable or observable.
Often sets off a firestorm of comments from evolution believers.
There we go.
And I think that's because of the numerous ways in which evolution is and has been described over the years. For example, textbooks will often define evolution as simply a change in gene frequencies and expression in a population over time. And if that were a legitimate definition of evolution, then I could call myself an evolutionist, because I know there are...
There we go. We're good. We're done. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Good night.
I guess he's an evolutionist.
I guess he's an evolutionist because it's literally the definition. I want to convey to people. I literally teach college freshmen evolution. And the definition that we use when we get to the population genetics lecture is changes in allele frequencies in populations over generations. That is the technical textbook definition of evolution at its most basic, simplest form. That is what evolution is.
And it captures everything, like every kind of possible change, the big changes, the little, all of that can be captured by that definition. That's why it works so well. It also works so well because it can tell, like, we can build null models from it, right? We know what populations should look like if they are not evolving. It also permits us to like represent things algebraically from which we can then derive the forces of evolution. So like it as that definition as a foundation for evolution permits us to study evolution in a way that like makes it such like a robust science using mathematics and like there's no other way that would allow you to study evolution.
But you guys are missing the crucial flaw with this definition of evolution that's accepted by the scientific consensus or whatever. And the biggest problem with this definition is that if you accept the definition of evolution that is the consensus in the field of science, then you can't be a creationist anymore. So it doesn't work. The definition can't work, obviously.
The other thing that this little switcheroo relies on here, this little, we're gonna have our own special definition of evolution, is it really tries to lean on these fake distinctions that creationists make, the microevolution, macroevolution, the observational versus historical science distinction. All of this stuff is irrelevant. And, you know, they love to throw around, well, that's just microevolution. And I was watching a video recently where a couple creationists were talking about how we need a new word for that doesn't involve the word evolution, so people stop conflating the fake population genetics evolution with the real definition of an E. coli sprouts legs in a lab evolution, right? Mm-hmm. And that definition, that little bait and switch there of disputing the definition ignores the fact, and this is, by the way, people, Zach has covered this on his channel in detail, is that you don't need more than those processes to accomplish whatever evolution is going to accomplish. The processes that will result in a change in allele frequencies over generations get you all of the evolution that we see. It's just a difference of scale and time frame. And so creationists, there's a great saying that the first place I heard it was on Reddit. I don't know if somebody on the debate evolution subreddit came up with it. If you did, thank you, Redditor, but I forget where it came from initially, or I don't know where it came from initially.
It was
But they
probably
said
Raccoon 6092.
they said that microevolution is evolution that creationists can't deny. Macroevolution is evolution that creationists must deny.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is they're the same. It's the same. If you accept one, you're stuck.
The way that I've communicated it before in debates to creationists is they'll say, look, like what you're asking for is for me to demonstrate a mile to you, the existence of a mile, but you only want me to use 12 inches to do it. It's like, I can demonstrate to you that you can walk 12 inches and you can use that same mechanism to walk a mile, but you can't demonstrate a mile in 12 inches. Like, it's the same mechanism. It's just you keep walking for a longer distance. If you keep allowing the mechanisms of microevolution to continue over longer generations, you'll get macroevolution. There's not a limit that's just going to stop the microevolution from getting bigger and bigger changes over time. There's no limit like the creationists want to say.
But have you heard of kinds, Grayson?
Oh,
because
yes.
cows only make cows.
Again, if you give me one more Beethoven quote after the night that I had last night, I think that, like,
it's got PTSD at this point.
Yeah, right.
There are changes in gene frequencies in the population of various organisms all over the world occurring constantly. But the big picture of what evolution means to the average person goes far beyond that. And anyone who's seen a popular evolutionary diagram showing the supposed evolution of a fish transforming into an amphibian, then a reptile, then a mammal, etc.
Can we just appreciate that the picture and the words do not match?
I was about to say, he mentioned fish,
Yeah.
reptiles, like everything this isn't.
What he should have shown was Tiktaalik, but what he was showing was the whale transition series. Somebody messed up there.
He's showing one mammal become another mammal, and he's talking about fish becoming reptiles.
He's not only showing one mammal, he's showing one cetacean becoming another cetacean.
Yeah.
Knows that all too well. The story of evolution makes grand claims, popularized by the various incarnations of Charles Darwin's famous Tree of Life diagram, about how the supposed first living thing that came into being slowly changed and eventually became every living thing that has ever existed on the planet. And that goes far beyond a simple comparison in gene frequencies in various organisms.
What was that?
What year do you think that is from? Like, they could have shown a current, like, phylogenetic tree or something, a current tree of life, but they're showing something that looks like it was from the 1800s.
It is, at least, yeah.
I think it's Haeckel's tree.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right about that, yeah.
That's like 1870, 1880.
Now, in contrast, some might simply describe the concept as evolution via natural selection. But creationists also believe in natural selection because it's observational science. And it's also an
observational science. Drink safely and responsibly. Didn't expect you to actually do it.
integral mechanism in the biblical creation model. So how can it be used as proof of evolution? And it's not as if creationists have only...
I just want to point out that AIG is all about sticking to the text of the Bible and not doing extra biblical things or interpreting the text. And yet here they are being like, natural selection is biblical.
I don't mean to change the topic, but I just once again need to express my concern for this man's safety. With all these books are about to fall on him. Every time they show a shot, I'm like, get out of the way, man. Like, a book avalanche is about to happen any second right now.
Yeah, it's a bad game of Jenga right there. The two right next to him, those are about to go. I actually think I'm pretty sure all the rest are fake. I think he's got the two next to him that are a little bit lighter in color, and I think all the rest are just fake. I think this is all green screen or
like behind him is it's just like a green screen.
Yeah, this is all these are not like actual piles of books. No.
We recently adopted natural selection as some revisionist history panderers have accused us of. You see, many people believe it was Charles Darwin who came up with the theory of natural selection that was put forth in his book, Origin of Species. Few realize that there's historical documentation stating he popularized the idea by borrowing it from several others, including the biblical creationist Edward Blyth. One can look up copies of the Magazine of Natural History from 1835 and 1837, available online in PDF form, and read several articles by Blyth describing the process of natural selection. And remember, Darwin had only just returned from his 5-year voyage in which he was collecting specimen samples on board the Beagle in October of 1836, and so he had not yet fully formulated his evolutionary ideas. So this was all in print well over 20 years before Darwin published Origin of Species. And it's also known, and fairly suspicious, that Darwin owned copies of these articles, with even one well-known and respected evolutionist, Lauren Isley, having written an entire book.
Maybe we should deal with this.
All right, let's. You want to let him finish this thought, and then we'll. Yeah.
Called Darwin and the Mysterious Mr. X, suggesting that specific passages in Darwin's book read entirely too close to much of Blyth's natural history articles.
Should we go here?
Yeah.
Or should we keep going?
I want you to make on this. They're like, isn't it suspicious that Darwin owned books written by Blyth? Isn't it suspicious? It's like, dude, go to page 18 on the Origin of Species, and Darwin specifically calls out Blyth by name. Like, it's like it's not suspicious. It's not its hidden secret. He says, my good fellow, William, like he names the guy in page 18 of his book. Like, it's not there's hiding his secret influences.
Yeah. There's also a bit of confusion here about what Blyth's idea of natural selection was versus what Darwin's idea of natural selection was. Blyth believed, it wasn't even Blyth's idea. This idea goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks. So, like, the idea that there's a war among organisms, that variations fight, and that any kind of like deviation from the archetype is actually sort of aberrant, and then sort of nature will weed them out, right? And so the idea of the fittest in this context is actually preservative. It's trying to keep everything just like it always has been, or, preserve the original type. That was Blyth's idea. God created the perfect form, these variations emerge, but then nature will get rid of that variation to keep the form perfect. That is fundamentally different from Darwin's idea. Darwin's idea was evolution by natural selection, that same process can actually cause new forms to emerge, not merely preserve the existing ones. So it's not that like creation is thought, and for one, Blyth did not think of that first. The ancient Greeks thought of that, who were pagans, I assume, to AIT.
Can't cite them. Can't cite them.
Yeah. So the creationists did not think of it first. And we also forget that actually by the end of Blyth's life, he was writing Darwin about the evolution of man from apes. And he was like pitching to Darwin, do you think man evolved from these other apes that we have? Like, he had already fully come on board with the thinking of evolution by the end of his life. So I don't know why they're pitching him in this way. And a last thought on this is that you can go to the Darwin archives. This is a really great resource online, is that basically Darwin kept up with everything, every letter that he ever wrote, every little, scratch paper that he had. You can find all of that online. And there's over 50 back and forth letters between him and Blyth. So they knew each other. Like, they were buddies. They talked a lot. And like, science is collaborative, right? Like, idolizing one man is maybe one of the problems here. Like, them thinking that Darwin is the patron saint of evolution. He's just a guy that contributed, just like all scientists do, right? And he had collaborators. So the entire way in which they have pitched the Blyth-Darwin mystery is just completely false.
If there's anything that I can add on to that, what Zach was saying, like, ideas about natural selection go all the way back to the ancient Greeks, like Empedocles and Aristotle and all of them. And yeah, they had this idea that there were these Platonic forms for animals, these archetypes, and then natural selection would get rid of the different variations that just crop up due to like heat and pressure and just various things. And they thought variations come up and then they're culled to preserve this Platonic ideal form of what the animal should be. Mm-hmm. But it's really interesting. I haven't seen the primary sources of this, but I've read that Leonardo da Vinci actually had an idea about that there's this natural selection process that Da Vinci's idea was actually groundbreaking because he thought that there's not a fixity of species and that they actually change over time, and that there wasn't these initial perfect forms. He thought that species change over time, and he thought that they change according to their fitness for the environment. So like Da Vinci was writing stuff about this. So like, you know, it's weird that they, of course, only want to go back a couple decades before Darwin, and they only specifically want to highlight the one guy that they can identify on their team, so that they can say, oh, actually, the only scientific part about evolution that they accept, natural selection, that was invented by a creationist, actually. So like, it's literally, Zach, you said it perfectly. This guy is the embodiment of smug. And this entire argument he's making right now about Blythe is just the only reason he's doing it is just to be smug and say that actually the creationists invented natural selection. Meh, meh, meh.
I'll just add two brief things to this. First is a silly point, which is that I like characterizing Charles Darwin as just a guy who contributed to the advancement of science, because you know what? I'm just a guy who contributed to the advancement of science a little bit too. You know, me and Charles Darwin, it's like that rookie who combined for 88 points with Wilt Chamberlain one night, right? It's like, there you go. Just, I like that. I forgot the second thing I was going to say. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about it.
And Darwin is just that guy that stole Blythe's ideas.
Just stealing ideas. Let's continue with this nonsense.
Although his thesis that Darwin had plagiarized much from Blythe
I remember the second thing. It came back. It was that what Blythe described was what we now know of as stabilizing selection, right? We have a distribution of traits, and basically the extremes of the phenotype, whatever they are, those are selected against. So the distribution narrows over time, right? Mm-hmm. That's not the only mode of natural selection. There's directional selection. There's disruptive selection, which leads to bimodal distributions and often sympatric speciation, right? So it's not the same thing as anything we talk about in the modern context, except for that one narrow little way that natural selection can operate. There we go.
Others, has been criticized by many of his fellow evolutionists. Prior to his honest assessment of the facts, Dr. Isley, a PhD in anthropology, was touted as a great scholar amongst the evolutionary community. Indeed, his accolades include earning 36 honorary degrees, receiving the Phi Beta Kappa Award for Best Science Book, titled Darwin's Century, and being fellow of multiple professional societies. Now deceased, he ended his career as Benjamin Franklin Professor of Anthropology and History of Science at the University of Pennsylvania. Indeed.
Let me tell you all how much I don't care about any of that.
Yeah, I don't know why we're spending all this time going through this dude's credentials.
It's a common thing that creationists do, and Sal Cordova comes to mind. Does this with like every person that he mentions is like John Sanford, Gene Gunn, so and so, this thing, right? It's the same. It's the
Yeah, I mean, he's trying to be like, oh well, this guy believed that Darwin plagiarized, and he is such a well decorated academic, so he must be right, kind of thing. Yeah, but like all of the historians that thought he was wrong on this and like showed him the documentation of why he was wrong have all the same degrees. Like it's not like the consensus view is that Darwin did not plagiarize this, and we actually have a lot more evidence than we did then. We have a lot more of his writings, a lot more of his notebooks and stuff than we did when Isley even wrote that book. So like the overwhelming consensus is that Darwin did not actually take much from Blythe at all in terms of his idea of natural selection.
And also, there's one small thing that I want to contribute to this, which is that creationists tend to have this idea that if you cite an authority figure in a field, everybody is no longer allowed to disagree with them. And the best response I've ever heard to this comes from Dr. Jay Bundy, whose channel Pocket Locker 86. If you're not subscribed, you should subscribe, because he did his PhD in the Lenski lab, the home of the long-term evolution experiment. And in this debate, the person who was arguing with him did not know that was the case and started quoting Lenski stuff at him and like said to him, like, person, biologist X, Y, and Z disagrees with what you're saying. And he said, his response was, I'm a professional biologist. My job is to argue with other biologists. Don't quote people at me. Make an argument. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I've said this. Yeah, I've said this to creationists a lot as well. Like, I'll get in arguments with them in comments and stuff like that, and they'll be like, "Well, PhD, blah blah." Like, I have the same degree. As
this me.
Like, you just need to make their argument. Don't come to me with their credentials. We have the same degree.
Somebody recently quoted the famous Royal Society meeting from a while back on evolution at me, and I was just like, don't quote them at me. Make the argument. They actually said, do you think you're doing a better job interpreting the evidence than the Royal? Yes, I am. They're wrong and I'm right.
Guess who was a major influence in setting that Royal Society meeting up?
This is Dennis Noble.
Dennis freaking Noble.
Dennis Noble, Roller. This is all of the. Oh my gosh,
that's going to be in your video, I bet.
It is. No, it is.
Yep.
Okay, real quick. I just want to say my headcanon for why they included this part. You're like, why are we going into all these details? This is my headcanon, right? So far, this whole video has been like, people were mean to us in the comments section. So we're going to make this video responding to mean people in our comments. This is my headcanon. Somebody in their comments was like, this is all just an appeal to authority. Or like, they'd be like, I bet you don't even know what an appeal to authority fallacy is. And you'd be like, oh, not only do we know what an appeal to authority fallacy is, we're going to show you how well we know what it is. And then they just
doing it for 20 minutes.
Yep. That's my headcanon.
They have multiple times just shown random YouTube comments, which is amazing.
Yeah. It seems to many that Darwin did some.
The big lesson for anyone viewing this is that AIG is really bothered by mean YouTube comments. So it would be a shame if their videos were flooded with them.
It'd be really bad. Turns out they have really thin skin.
Yeah, seems like they actually read them, which makes me feel good. Sometimes I write long comments. I like to think maybe they're reading them.
No, I think honestly they probably do that. I'm not reading that. But what's the saying? I'm not reading that, but I'm happy for you or sorry.
I'm sorry that happened.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Selecting of his own when compiling material for his book. Regardless, I often enjoy reminding evolutionists that as far as natural selection goes, we understand it very well. After all, we creationists thought of it first.
Smug.
Like this guy. Can we just have like a collective like this effing guy moment right there?
When I watched this for the first time, I just wanted to just like throw my computer. I was like, "Are you kidding me right now?" Like
the face he made there, just like, let me be him.
Yeah.
Folks, we warned you it was going to be a petty stream.
You see, along with most other creationists that had gone before him, such as Carolus Linnaeus, the Swedish biologist who essentially formalized our modern classification system of naming organisms, Blythe recognized the God of the Bible as the creator who had designed the original kinds of creatures to be able to adapt and survive in a post-fall world. Natural selection was therefore seen as the mechanism that would explain how the limited number of animal kinds God sent on board Noah's Ark would then have been able to speciate after the flood and account for the numerous variety of modern animals we see today.
Somebody should tell him about Nathaniel Jeanson's created created heterozygosity and natural processes model, the CHNP model, which it's mostly built. It's mostly sorting, not it.
See, they don't want to do that, Dan, because in the last few years we've developed this whole field of archaeogenetics, where they found that actually really old skeletons and really old DNA isn't more heterozygous. So it turns out
those are just the highly inbred. Those are just the highly inbred hypermutating ones, Grayson.
Yeah. So it turns out that created heterozygosity not actually reflected in the data. Sorry, Jeanson.
That's a real, Zach, that's a real argument, by the way, that they're both hypermutating and highly inbred.
Yeah.
Make that work. Make that work with your fancy population genetics math.
You see, Dan, this is what we call fine-tuned population genetics. Okay, God finely tuned the hypermutation rate with the inbreeding rate to just make it all.
Make it, folks. For people who don't professionally, semi-professionally follow creationists and also do population genetics, to be hypermutating and inbred is just you're saying 4 = 5. It doesn't. Yeah. It doesn't work.
Those
All
are
according to
opposites
their
of each other.
original kind, what we would consider to be around the family level today. Natural selection is a process that occurs when varieties in the offspring of various organisms, due to the built-in variety of pre-existing genetic information already inside them, are produced. And if the specific combination of genes that are expressed result in ways that confer a survival benefit to the organism in the environment they're in, such as long-haired varieties in cold regions or short-haired ones in warm areas, those with that specific genetic makeup will be more likely to create more offspring and become the dominant kind in that area.
By the way, I've done a video on this silly he's describing the concept of created heterozygosity. I've done a video on this. I did some simple math showing that the rates of the process he just described, recombination, would have to be far in excess of what they actually are in order to get the level of variation that we see. And Zach has done an even more detailed video on created heterozygosity, and it's fantastic, and I recommend it to everybody. So
I think it's really funny to think about if created heterozygosity is real, what blood type would Adam be? Because he would have like over 1,000 alleles for like different blood types. So it's like, what blood type would he be?
All of them. He'd be all
It'd
of
be
the
magic blood. I mean, the answer to any of these is it's magic.
You know, the solution to this is created polyploidy, right? Just wait. That's the solution to the problem.
Dan has been waving this flag for so long.
Go for it, folks. Created polyploidy. Just do it. Just admit it.
When these new varieties continue to reproduce amongst themselves, they may become even more specific in their looks or behavior, etc., as they may not have access to potential mates with a wider variety of genetics. This means that the new population will have less variety of genetic information than the original parent population did. Therefore, natural selection is not a creative process. It can only select from what pre-exists. Genes that aren't in the gene pool of any particular kind of creature can't be selected for, so natural selection never produces anything truly new.
Hey, Zach, this is like the thing you do professionally. Are there any other mechanisms of evolution besides natural selection?
Indeed, there are. It turns out the creative processes of evolution are mutation, right? Like that's where new variation actually comes from. I do want to make kind of an interesting historical point here, is that he talks about natural selection, whether or not it's a creative process. And this is actually a debate that goes all the way back to Darwin, who did believe that natural selection was a creative process. He doesn't give like the full historical context or light to the historical
Shocker.
But the idea is basically like this. Like if you imagine the state space of all possible mutations that can happen, we don't actually think that wherever a population is sitting at that time has access to all mutations, right? You're kind of constrained developmentally with what you can access. But let's say you get a mutation that allows you to move in one direction and selection favors it. Then what that does is it biases the kinds of mutations that can occur in the future in that direction. And so in this way, you can actually think about selection as a kind of creative process, because it's directing where that population or the sorts of variation that can emerge in that population. So that's the argument that Darwin and many others early on made for natural selection being a creative process. Thomas Hunt Morgan, Hugo de Vries, a lot of those sorts of people didn't like that, and they argued against that. They were the quote unquote mutationist. But like, that's the idea about natural selection as a creative force. It's not that any evolutionary biologist thought that natural selection itself created things. They thought that it biased the direction of what can occur because selection is favoring something in that direction. And then ideally, variation can just keep emerging in the direction that selection is pushing it, right? So in that way, it becomes a directive creative process.
I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, the only issue is that there's way too much nuance with it. I mean, where's the part where the creationist came up with it?
One thing I don't like is whatever this is supposed to be, because
I know it. Thank you. I didn't want to be that petty. I didn't want to be the guy to bring this up, but
no, I'm going to bring this up. I don't know what this twisted washboard monstrosity is supposed to be, but it's definitely not supposed to be DNA.
It almost looks like a salp, like a salp, or maybe like a jellyfish arm or something.
I know that I'm like the only one that doesn't work professionally with DNA here, but like DNA is my favorite molecule. Like, I have an actually atomically accurate DNA, even with the hydrogen atoms here behind me. And this is a personal pet peeve of mine. I'm sorry to get on my soapbox right now, but this is not just in creationist media. This is in like movies, in actual science shows on PBS and stuff. Like every
so bad.
time they depict DNA, it bothers me when they're just like giving it this weird texture or making it look just like an actual ladder or a cartoon. I'm like, dude, just like it looks so cool with the actual atoms. Like, why don't I ever see an atomically accurate DNA
Grayson,
in any media?
I can't tell. You know, in your little box, do you have your purine, pyrimidine? Are they, you know?
Yes,
good.
They're all labeled.
Excellent.
Look.
And the sizes are asymmetric. Oh yeah, look at that! Down. Wow, you've really got them. Nice.
Yeah,
that's
from the
really
top
cool.
down, even with the hydrogens, you can see the hydrogen bonds. It's like it's the best model ever.
Is that 3D printed? That's really cool.
It's 3D printed by this woman on Etsy. She's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm like, it is not that hard. Like if I don't know, man, it just bothers me that we never get accurate representations of the DNA molecule in any movie, any media, anything I've seen.
At least at least the twist is in the right orientation. What was the organization that came up with their new logo and it twisted the wrong way?
Oh God.
Yeah. At least they got the twist right. So, you know, credit where it's due.
As Professor Walter Veith, PhD in zoology, said regarding the claim natural selection somehow evolves new creatures, the very name selection implies that you're choosing between two or more variants. Natural selection never increases the number of variants, it only decreases them. So how does a mechanism that makes less and less end up making more and more?
It doesn't always.
Yeah,
it doesn't.
I got it. There you go.
It doesn't always decrease them. I mean, so there is a such thing as like balancing selection,
right?
And so and also stabilizing selection on polygenic traits tends to actually keep
it the same.
Like allele at intermediate frequencies, or I mean, sometimes they can drift higher and lower, but like that, it's not weeding out variation all the time. That's not always what selection is doing. And for like, there are lots of cases, lots of rather famous cases, like sickle cell anemia is a rather famous case in which you have balancing selection, right? So like you're actually maintaining diversity by natural selection. It's
there you go
famous.
With that nuance again.
That's what I do. It's my whole channel. It's just like
I mean, it's like, yeah. But I thought the whole conceit of this video is we creationists understand this better than you.
This is true. This is they studied it in depth. Look at all of those books. He's been studying for so long.
See, I was saying, folks, before we went on air, I think this background actually indicates a lack of focus and a lack of commitment, because when I finish a book, it goes back on the shelf. I have a pile of books right next to me that you can't see that are in progress. When I'm reading a book, it sits right there. Once I'm done, we got to clear that space.
We all know that what this guy actually believes is that all the information you ever need to know about the world is found in specifically one book. Mm-hmm. You don't need all of these. There's one book that this guy in particular really, really likes above all the others. And that's the only book I would go off on a limb and say that's the only book that he's read on this topic of origins, but we'll see.
But again, you can see how if you've been taught to believe that natural selection equates to evolution, this could lead to Bible skeptics accusing creationists of...
Wait, hang on. That's perfect. Hang on.
Is the video quality, is it as poor for anyone else as it is? Because I can't really make out the letters here. Is that just on my end, or is the audience... not seeing that
on YouTube? It looks let's see here, let me I
don't need to derail the stream, but like I don't really have a high video quality to where I can even read that.
It looks fine on my on StreamYard. On YouTube it is lower, but I can read it.
Okay.
I don't know. I see people saying they can't say it. They can't see it, but I mean,
no,
it says, I'll read the comment. The comment from our friend Supernova 1725 says,
shout outs.
OMG, there is no difference between macro and micro. They are just referring to the scale.
Good job.
I mean, in terms of the mechanisms, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, that's
we study them differently, but the mechanism is exactly the same.
Yeah. Fact check. True. Good job. Good job, random YouTube commenter. Keep it up.
You get a higher score on your evolution test than the makers of this video by a large amount.
By a lot.
Lead to Bible skeptics accusing creationists of not understanding evolution. They might look at us as intellectual bumpkins because evidence of natural selection can be observed all the time.
I didn't
And
want to
so,
say it, but
like a parent trying to help a child, they often try to explain examples of natural selection, such as pesticide resistance, or changes in stickleback fish, or finch beak sizes of moths to us, like we're 5 years old, in order to help us understand the reality of evolution.
He's so upset.
Can we just appreciate how mad this man is right now?
He's so upset. He was so butthurt just then.
Just triggered by YouTube comments making fun of him. And then he goes, "Oh yeah, stupid evolutionist. You think all of these things are examples of evolution." And then he goes and lists like a half dozen examples of evolution and go, "Yeah, stickleback fish. I use that example in class. That's a great example of sympatric speciation. It's a great example." Yes, Calvin, thank you. Appreciate it. Also, I'll pause just for a second here because we've for $9.99 from Vince O'Connor. Grayson, would you share the Etsy store? The Etsy store often person who made the DNA molecule. I want one. If you can't, no worries.
I just looked it up while I saw that it's called The Molecule Company, all one word on Etsy.
If you and Grayson, if you want to just comment in the chat, I will wrench you so that you can post links. I don't know if you're already wrenched, but you should be.
I will post a link in the chat. Then I'll post a little tester so you can wrench me if I'm not.
Yeah, there you go. We'll get that link to people if you want a DNA molecule. It's really cool.
Take the aforementioned peppered moth as an example. It's been referred to gushingly by evolutionists as not only the poster child of Darwinian evolution, but also as the prize horse in our stable in terms of evidence of evolution via natural selection.
No, it effing isn't. No, it's not. Stop. Just stop. I teach this for a living. The number of times across all the classes I teach in a calendar year that this experiment comes up is 0. So I'll put that out there. No, it's not. Stop.
As one evolution.
By the way, folks, this is like 6 minutes of the video. It's all this peppered moth nonsense. Just strap in.
Evolutionists put it. It's the slam dunk of natural selection, the paradigmatic story that converts high school and college students to Darwin, the thundering left hook to the jaw of creationism.
Can I?
That is, of course, until all sorts of shenanigans.
Sorry, am I frozen?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, sorry. Lucas kind of stalled for a second. She's actually being facetious. The book that she wrote is actually the one that called Kettlewell a fraud. Like Of Moth and Men is the famous book that like caused Michael Majerus, who we're going to talk about shortly, to go out and redo Kettlewell's experiments because of her book. So if it reads as if she's like kind of writing weird, like that's kind of a weird thing to say, it's because she's being snarky. She actually doesn't believe those things. So like they've cited her completely out of context. I just wanted to give everyone the context.
Just don't realize. Oh my goodness.
I shouldn't be surprised at this point, considering how many times creationists will quote mine a scientist to make it sound like they're saying something that they absolutely were never saying. But like every time, it just like the level of dishonesty always surprises me, even now. My favorite example of this all time was actually in when Dapper Dinosaur and Guts a Gibbet and I did the series on the dismantled, let's call it a documentary. And they showed the abstract of a paper on screen by Michael Lynch, and they highlight the first line of the abstract and be like, look, Michael Lynch says blah, 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 blah. But on screen, they actually showed the whole paragraph. And if you pause the video and read the last 2 sentences, it actually says, however, we now understand blah, 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 refuting the premise of the thing. It's on screen. It shows the refutation. The example that always comes to my mind is that Mary Schweitzer had to actually add a disclaimer to the top of her publication saying, if you're a creationist, stop using this. It doesn't support your worldview. Like she had to have a disclaimer for her scientific paper to get them to cease and desist quote mining her.
She did these are not the droids you're looking for.
Yeah. And it still doesn't help. Almost every week, a creationist in my comments will say, oh, Mary Schweitzer found a living dinosaur blood in fossils. It's like, dude, no, she doesn't. It's like, she literally, like, look at the paper that you're citing. The very first sentence is a disclaimer directed at you, telling you to knock it off.
That is, of course, until all sorts of shenanigans surrounding how these studies and experiments involving the peppered moth were conducted was exposed in the book Melanism, Evolution in Action by fellow evolutionist Michael Majerus, a geneticist from Cambridge University.
So here's what we're going to do with this this part, because I'm going to let this go for like the 5 minutes or whatever. And then I'm going to turn the floor over to Zach and Grayson, because they have both have standing background knowledge on this that I do not, and also have done a lot of research on this that I have not. So we're going to let this section play out, and then I'm going to let you two just rant, and I'm like going to go get a beverage. I'm going to have a snack, and then I'll come back once you're done ranting.
And I have to mute myself to just stop from interrupting this madness we're about to witness.
Yeah. All right. Here we go.
You see, the majority of the supposed proof of the evolution of the peppered moths was provided by Dr. Bernard Ketterwell from Oxford University, who was so confident in his conclusions regarding the variation in moths driven by natural selection that he declared if Charles Darwin had only seen his experiments, he would have witnessed the consummation and confirmation of his life's work. That is, the confirmation of the story of evolution. And even though Ketterwell's work had been known to be suspect for years prior, such as the discovery that he'd glued moths to tree trunks to get pictures of them where they don't rest naturally, Majerus's criticisms, likely because he was a fellow evolutionist, shook up the evolutionary community quite severely. Case in point, even vociferous atheist and anti-creationist Dr. Jerry Coyne, in a review of Majerus's book in the journal Nature, said the following after hearing the peppered moth example perhaps wasn't all it was originally cracked up to be. My own reaction resembles the dismay attending my discovery at the age of 6 that it was my father and not Santa who brought the presents on Christmas Eve. But wait a second, did Coyne truly understand evolution before this happened? Because all the peppered moth example ever accomplished was simply a demonstration of natural selection anyway, which isn't evolution in the big sense whatsoever. As mentioned previously, all it demonstrates is a reshuffling of genetic information that already existed. If you already had moths with various colors, and then certain environmental conditions favored certain colors over others, who really cares? As the British zoologist L. Harrison Matthews said in his introduction to the 1971 edition of Origin of Species, the experiments beautifully demonstrate natural selection, or survival of the fittest, in action, but they do not show evolution in progress, for however the populations may alter in their content or light, intermediate, or dark forms, all the moths remain from beginning to end Biston betularia. You see, Matthews, a committed evolutionist, understood that if evolution were true, then at one time there were creatures without lungs.
All right, I think we can pause there, and I'm just going to turn the floor over to you gentlemen for a moment. So, Zach, why don't you start us off?
Yeah.
What the hell? That's my reaction to that whole bit. What the?
I think that this is like a really strange framing. So, and I think we need to just like take a step back here. And the Biston betularia is a very common moth that has occurred in England for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? Like people have known that it's been there for a very long time. The very first melanistic form of it was not reported until like 1815, 1820.
That means darkly pigmented, folks.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's so there's the normal form is the peppered color, where it's mostly white, but it has like a little bit of like peppered color. It's I don't know, it's kind of self-explanatory. Yeah. It's a peppered color. And then there's another variant that is melanistic or black, right? The whole thing is just black. Now, no one ever reported a black moth until the 1820s. Okay. And so they were very, very rare. And we actually know now where the melanism comes from. It's actually a single transposon that inserted into what's a gene called cortex. And in lepidopterans, the cortex gene controls color patterns. And so this single mutational insertion into that gene caused the melanistic form. And we know that happened fairly recently. So it is a mutation. It wasn't standing variation. We know how it happened. And then by the late 1890s, around 98% of all Bistembetullaria were melanistic. So you went from in the early 1800s where they were super, super rare, only one person recorded one in their backyard. And then it wasn't until the 1890s or by the 1890s, virtually all of these moths were black. Now that's just the facts, right? Like that's the base fact of what we have observed in nature. And then in the early 1920s, a man that some of you might have heard of named J.B.S. Haldane, he's one of the three big Trinity founders of evolution, along with Sol Wright and R.A. Fisher. He actually calculated the strength of natural selection or how strong natural selection must have been to cause the increase of the frequency of that allele to go from like 5% in 1820 to 98% in 1890. Right. And he was the first person to calculate how strong selection must have been. And what he estimated was it must have been between 30 and 50% advantage, depending on where you start that initial frequency at. So he didn't actually have like the complete data. He said, if we take at 1820, it was 5%, and at 1890, it's 98%, then that gives you a range of what that selective intensity must have been. Okay, so that's sort of the background. It wasn't until the 1850s that somebody actually tried to test it experimentally. That is to say, they wanted to know, well, what is the agent of selection?
Wait,
right?
so Zach, just two quick things. So one, first, I want to point out to everybody who may have missed it there, just how groundbreaking that is, because now what we're doing is we're not just describing qualitatively what happens with natural selection, we're describing it quantitatively in terms of, if you think about natural selection in terms of steps, right? How many steps can you take and how fast can you take those steps, right? That's what we're doing here. And also, I just want to be clear, we're up to the 1950s, not the, are we 1950s or 1850s?
1950s is Kettlewell's experiments. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Just want to make sure, because you said 1850s. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah. So Kettlewell's starts his experiments in the 1950s. And to just give like a final shout out here to Haldane, he starts the 1924 paper with a satisfactory theory of natural selection must be quantitative in order to establish the view that natural selection is capable of accounting for the known facts of evolution. We must show not only that it can cause a species to change, but that it can cause it to change at a rate which will account for present and past transmutations. And I point this out because a lot of people at the time thought that maybe it was like pollution causing mass mutation. And so it was just like a phenotypic plasticity, or it was some kind of like massive induction of a new trait that was causing these melanistic forms. And by using the mathematics of population genetics, he showed that if it were mutation, 1 out of every 4 moths would have to mutate to the black form, which is a rate way higher than any mutation rate we have ever seen before. And so he shows that cannot account for what we've seen, selection can. Right. And so like that's sort of the mathematical argument that he put forward. And it was believed at the time that the most likely explanation for the increase in frequency was predation by birds, right? That if you have a melanistic form that lands on these soot-covered trees, so this is during the time of the Industrial Revolution, so you had lots of coal-burning factories all across this area that just like coated the forest in soot. It also killed the lichens on the trees that the moths would normally land on. And so by killing all of those things, it made it where the black forms actually were more camouflage against the tree trunks than the original peppered form. And so the argument was, well, maybe birds can differentiate them and that's what's causing it, right? Irrespective of whether that part is true, the frequency still increased really, really rapidly. The math still indicates natural selection. Right. So I just want to put that going into Kettlewell's experiments, where he then tried to show that birds will actually selectively eat, the colors that aren't matching the trees that they're on. Kettlewell was a little sloppy. And people knew that at the time. Like, people talked about, like, and people debated how well he had actually conducted his experiments. But in general, they supported the idea that birds would selectively feed on moths that were not matching their background, right? So that's what Kettlewell's experiments showed. I've been talking for a while, so I'm going to let Grayson take it here.
Before we get to Grayson, I just want to say very briefly, Zach, that was fantastic. I don't want to give you homework, but like, you should totally do a video just on that.
On the peppered moths.
Yeah.
You know, that was an excellent recounting of the history. Like,
yeah, it's fantastic.
that was crazy cool.
Like, you just clip that and be like, hey, peppered moths, here's what it actually is.
It's a fantastic story, right? Like, it really is a pretty neat story. And even if you don't like count Kettlewell's sort of again, he wasn't a fraud. Like, this is what Judith Hopper tried to argue, is that he was a fraud. He was not a fraud.
The point I wanted to make, Zach, was that
go ahead.
Even if Kettlewell completely fabricated all of his data and was just completely fraudulent, like, even if, like, you know, I mean, he obviously had a massive, important contribution to the history of science and evolution, because this was like one of the key examples, like, taught in the 20th century after his work. This had a major impact on the field. But even if he'd faked all of it, it wouldn't matter at all, because this freaking experiment has been repeated like a half a dozen times since he did that. And like at least 3 times in just the early 2000s alone after Majerus's book. Like, and honestly, of all of the like terrible lies in this video, I'm actually might be the most mad at how they portrayed Michael Majerus's work, because I then looked it up and like, it is just so bad. And I know, like we were talking about earlier, the scientists that like know that they're being misquoted by creationists and their work is being lied about. You know, Michael Majerus has to be just so annoyed with people like this, because I went and I looked at his publications, and there's a review article about the peppered moth, the controversy that they've portrayed around his book that he published. Because just for those of you that missed it, they said to kick off this whole thing, they said, but then Michael Majerus came along in the 90s and published a book that they said had all this controversy and debunked the peppered moth and exposed it as a fraud and a fake and all this stuff. That's how they conveyed Michael Majerus's book. And then they said, oh, Jerry Coyne said it was like finding out Santa Claus isn't real. And like, Jerry Coyne is kind of a big name in evolutionary biology, so it's like it has some weight. They're doing this appeal to authority again. But here's the thing, right? I went and I read Michael Majerus's paper about this, which is like, I think it's a little bit less than 10 years after he published that book, right? So he's recounting the entire history of this peppered moth experiment from the 1800s all the way to the mid 2000s, like after the publication of his book, in his own words. And it is just so completely damning of everything that they said in this video. I just wanted to read specific parts from it, because he addresses the Jerry Coyne quote. He literally addresses that because he hates that quote so much. And I want everybody to keep in mind that he's writing this in an academic paper. So you can't actually put Jerry Coyne on blast in an academic paper.
As we learned, there are limits.
He found a brilliant way around it, because he just quoted somebody else putting Jerry Coyne on blast as a summation of the field. So he doesn't inject his own opinion like explicitly, but you can tell his thoughts about the subject when I read this. So he's like, oh, in November 1998, a review of the book was published in Nature. The review was by Professor Jerry Coyne was this. He cites it, and he says, Coyne's review asserts that the book shows the case that the peppered moth to be in, quote, bad shape. And then he gives the quote about Santa Claus. It's literally in this paper by Michael Majerus. And then the next paragraph, he says, Donald Frack, an American scientist who has many times locked horns with the advocates of special creation and intelligent design, dismisses Coyne's review, writing, there is essentially no resemblance between Majerus's book and Coyne's review of it. If you pick through the book, you might be able to argue for Coyne's accuracy, but only at the expense of completely ignoring the majority of the text and all of Majerus's intent. Yeah. And again, this is Michael Majerus who's quoting that in his own publication. So like, this quote, total BS. And then one more quote, if I just can, from Michael Majerus's book, because this is the very last 2 sentences of the abstract. Remember, this is an entire literature review all about the peppered moth experiment and how it's changed over the last 70 years, right? So at the last two sentences of his abstract, this is what Michael Majerus writes. Again, almost 10 years after the publication of his book, that the creationists were saying debunks the peppered moth experiment. They're saying Majerus debunked it. So let's see what Majerus himself says 10 years after the publication of the book. He says, accusations of data fudging and scientific fraud in the case are found to be vacuous. The conclusion from this analysis of criticisms of the case is that the industrial melanism in the peppered moth is still one of the clearest and most easily understood examples of Darwinian evolution in action and should be taught as such in biology classes.
Yeah, and he's directly responding here to Judith Hooper, who they cited in this video, right? Like, she was the one that claimed Ketterwell had actually committed fraud. Majerus was just saying that there were some issues with his experimental design, right? And then Coyne ran with that. I do want to point out that Majerus spent he's dead now. He spent the last 7 years of his life trying to like replicating Ketterwell's experiment, and the big paper that showed that indeed like the peppered moth story is very solid was actually cobbled together by his students. So he passed away just before he was able to put it like to finally write the paper. They took all his data, all the things that he'd been doing for the last 7 years of his life, and published it. And
that's cool.
And from that, Jerry Coyne actually retracted his criticism and has a blog post that says, turns out the peppered moth is actually really solid and I was wrong. And so like, there's a nice little bow on this story.
That's nice. I like that.
Yeah. Why hasn't anybody told the creationist yet?
I guarantee you they have. They don't listen. This is the same thing as with, like, you all know, I'm sure, the Dan Grauer, if ENCODE is right, evolution is wrong thing from 2013. And then he wrote the paper that was published in 2017 on that. There was a 2020 paper that showed the math in the 2017 paper was wrong. And yet creationists still cite the 2017 paper, ignoring the revision where Grauer, and I know this because I emailed him and asked about it, and he told me the whole backstory. He was a reviewer on the 2020 paper, agreed that the math in the 2020 paper was right. His original math was wrong, recommended publication without revision, which we all know how rare that is, of the 2020 paper. And now there's a correction on the 2017 paper saying, hey, this is wrong. Go check out this other paper.
It's amazing.
And yet they still cite that original thing. It's the same thing. Creationists. I've been beating this drum for a while, and I'm going to keep saying it, because you keep not doing it. And what I've been saying is do a better job. You want to be taken seriously, act like it.
Isn't it so cool, you guys, how science has this neat thing called repetition and peer review, where you repeat the results? So it's like, yeah, like this, like Kettlewell, like his entire experiment could have been a fraud, but it's been repeated several times after, and they verified its results showing natural selection in peppered moths. I mean, it's just been shown empirically over and over again at this point.
Yeah, and again, to be clear, we're talking about it showed the agent of selection, right? It showed that birds are the agent of selection. We already knew before Kettlewell that natural selection was really the only explanation for the rapid increase in frequency.
It couldn't have been induced mutations through whatever process that wouldn't.
It couldn't have been drift. That was way too fast. It couldn't be induced mutation. Selection was the only explanation mathematically. And what's really, really cool is that in the Majerus paper, they were able to estimate the selection coefficient, and it was 30%, which is exactly what Haldane estimated it to be in 1924. So
which is also a really very large. That is a very large number.
It is it's extremely strong selection, and Haldane. And nobody bought Haldane's argument early on, and he talks about this in his famous Defense of Beanbag Genetics paper in 1950. And because he says like nobody believed him that selection could really be this strong in nature when he calculated mathematically, but then they believed it once Kettlewell showed it. And they, because he showed it empirically. He was like, but I told you guys in 1920 it had to be this.
I showed you the math. I already told you that's
math. Biologists don't like math, man.
Zach, I just want you to know that in part because of you, I have been trying to convey to my students how much they should embrace math in the study of biology. I just want you to know that.
They should. I mean, it really, and this is true. Like, guys, if you're interested in like anybody watching this, if you're like an undergrad in biology, you're thinking about being an evolutionary biologist or going to grad school, embrace the math, embrace the stats, embrace computer programming.
Yes.
That's the kind of thing you're going to be spending a lot of your time doing. It's like the modern way we do science is highly mathematical.
I actually, if I can share this, I recently had a bit of a paradigm shift. Not recently, but a couple of years that like made me not really appreciate math to liking math way more. And
I'm gonna be. Hang on, just 1 second, Grayson. I'm gonna be right back. So do your thing. I'm gonna be right back. Then we're gonna pick up where we left off. I'll be right back.
Is it just like a little tip or trick for those that don't like math but feel like they, I don't know, could? But that was me a little bit ago. I just didn't get that into it. And the paradigm shift that I had was starting to like, because I didn't really like memorizing mathematical equations, right? Yeah. I liked learning facts about the world, but I didn't like memorizing equations. But then I started thinking about, well, these are kind of like spells. Like you're memorizing this ancient language that these Greek symbols and letters, and you're memorizing this little spell that teaches you about the world. And if you memorize it, you can kind of predict the future in a way. You can say, oh, if this, and this, then this. And you can measure it, and it's accurate. It's like you have this deep insight into the world that you couldn't gain from a normal language. You had to learn this special ancient language that isn't even spoken. It's only, it's like a spell book, and as soon as I started thinking about math equations as spells and myself as like a little apprentice wizard, I was like, wow, I'm so much more into this. And now I want to learn all the mathematical equations. And it just it made it fun.
Yeah.
So
I think that is a really fun way of thinking about it. Especially like if you're like starting off and you're trying to like get into mathematics. I will say that like when math really starts to flow and when it really starts to make sense is when you don't think about it as memorizing equations, but you think about it as like, I've got a problem. How would I model this? How could I represent this in such a way that I could predict the future? And then like you actually just speak the math into existence, right? Like you take the symbols, because you know what the input should be, the way that it's to think like population genetics, that you're dealing with a Mendelian population, and you can insert all of the different idealizations that you want into it. And then you're basically constructing a sort of machine, right? This sort of like thing that you then feed in the information, and then it spits out an answer for you.
Yeah.
And what's really cool is when you start doing things like calculus, and you can integrate, and you can think about things that can functions that change over time. You can think about like the probability distributions of things through time. You can think about like Markov processes and stochastic equations, and you can really, really like take all of the forces of evolution into one like really beautiful expression. And what's so magical about it, right? Like to use your magic analogy, is that it works. Like it actually makes predictions about nature. That Haldane was able to tell us what the selection coefficient of this trait was in 1920 without ever picking up a moth. He didn't have to hold a single moth. He didn't have to see a single moth get eaten. But he had all the information he needed to tell us how strong selection must have been.
All I have to say, Zach, is that you are a freaking wizard, man.
All right, we actually don't have that much left in this video because, we're about 2/3 of the way through the actual content. God help us, it's been over an hour. But the last few minutes are just, normal AIG nonsense. So let's keep.
Then lungs evolved. At one time, there were creatures without wings. Then wings evolved. There were creatures without echolocation. Then that ability and all of its required genetic software and hardware, so to speak, evolved, etc. Evolution is supposed to explain where all the new stuff came from. Ultimately, evolution has to demonstrate where the acquisition of new abilities, forms, functions, and features came from. And these moths don't have anything new. So he understood.
They actually do.
They do have something new.
That is actually new.
Yeah.
That is a new thing that appeared in the 1800s that didn't exist. It is actually new.
It is a brand new mutation that caused a new trait, just like they asked for.
It is actually new. Yeah.
Showing examples of a process that selects genetic information that's already in existence cannot be deemed evolution in action. And again, remember that the peppered moth has been touted as one of the best proofs of evolution, and here you have a renowned evolutionist admitting it's nothing of the sort. So, how many evolution believers really understand evolution?
Once again, the smug. Can we just...
I just want to point out that I'm on a panel with a PhD in evolutionary biology and a population geneticist, like two people that 100% understand evolution. Like, I mean, oh God, man.
I got.
Of course, if you've been keeping up to date on the whole peppered moth story, Majerus later flipped the script and said he'd done research of his own that vindicates Ketterwell's original conclusions, even if he used improper methods to divine them.
Uh-huh.
And some evolutionists, such as Steve Connor, the science editor for the Indie, the British liberal-leaning online newspaper called The Independent.
The liberal-leaning. God
Wait,
forbid.
is he actually going to address Majerus' experiment that totally vindicated the veracity of the pepper moth experiment, or what?
No, they just did that. They just kind of.
So they just mention it, but don't address it. It just
they're like, hey,
in the video.
Yeah.
Hey, this guy said it was all wrong this one time, and then he went back and showed that it was fine. And then also this liberal newspaper,
right? Man, like, why do I care what was published in the Independent? You just
I think this is
the main source for your debunking just debunked your video, and you're just gonna skip right over that?
Famous peer-reviewed journal, The Independent.
Independent have tried to use the situation to make it seem like, once again, those silly creationists just don't understand evolution.
Yes.
He wrote, creationists smelt blood. The story of the peppered moth became a story of how Darwinism itself was flawed, with its best known example being based on fiddled data. Quoting Majerus, he said, "The peppered moth story is easy to understand because it involves things that we are familiar with. Vision and predation and birds and moths and pollution and camouflage and lunch and death. That's why the anti-evolution lobby attacks the peppered moth story. They're frightened that too many people will be able to understand." Now, do you see what he's trying to do here? By making it seem as if creationists were only focusing on whether the original research was flawed or not, he's saying that creationists are obfuscating the real argument and that they're trying to lure people away from truly understanding the peppered moth study.
Yes.
That's exactly what he's saying.
That is 100% what we are saying. That is exactly what is happening here.
The level of self-awareness we just witnessed, it's off the charts. He's so smug. Like, his level of smugness is so high that he can literally just say exactly what he's doing and pretend he's not doing it.
Can we just appreciate this from Sydney Raptor for a moment? Let's just coin a term here: smugnorant. The mental state that manifests when a person suffers from the Dunning-Kruger effect. That's smugnorant. I like that. That was Rob Carter levels of lack of self-awareness right there. That was really bad.
No, like, it seems like he's very self-aware. He just explained exactly what he's been doing the whole video.
This is what they're saying we're doing. We're not doing that, are we? He's this close to an "are we the baddies" moment. He's this close.
Well, I want to hear what
he's supposedly the best.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say I want to hear what he thinks that they're actually doing in this video, as opposed to the very accurate thing
what he just described.
Yeah,
saying that creationists are obfuscating the real argument and that they're trying to lure people away from truly understanding the peppered moth study, which again is supposedly the best known example of Darwinism and perhaps why they are so defensive of it. However, far from wanting the average high schooler or college student to know what the data shows, we wish everyone would come to understand it fully. Because it's just an example of natural selection, but is certainly not an example of evolution. The only point creationists made regarding the doctored evidence in the moth experiments was that evolutionists have been caught fudging their data to fit their story many, many times now. So people should be cautious of accepting it without serious consideration. Even Coyne raised a similar concern when he said this about the dubious experiments regarding the peppered moth, which had convinced him and so many others initially. It is also worth pondering why there has been general and unquestioned acceptance of Ketterwell's work.
It's because other people independently verified that it was true.
Yeah.
And there were other people that were working on this at the same time. Like Kettlewell is part of like E.B. Ford's ecological genetics, like school of thought. Like there was a whole group of people that was doing work on melanism and moths. Like just because Jerry Coyne doesn't know about it, that doesn't impress me.
Especially, never. Not the topic of this video, but yes. We're not gonna go there, but at some point we're gonna go there. I just want to say that I related, not relevant, but it's funny and it's related to the moment we just had, that I mentioned the selfish gene today in class this morning. I mentioned the selfish gene because we're talking about the evolution of life history traits and trade-offs and game theory and stuff. And I mentioned the selfish gene as, it's kind of old, but it's still a good kind of broad kind of work if you're interested in this and you want to look at it. And I mentioned the author. I don't endorse his recent work, but the author is Richard Dawkins. And then somebody audibly like guffawed in class, and I was like, if you know, you know. We're not going to do it now, but yeah, same thing with Coyne.
Oh, how the mighty have fallen.
How the mighty it's so sad.
I'm reading The Selfish Gene right now. I'm going to do a book review of it in the near future.
I'm looking forward to that.
I'll be watching that.
I'm looking forward to that a lot. I think that'll be really good. And I'm also worried that you're going to hate it and I'm going to have to change my view because I generally like The Selfish Gene.
So I'm about halfway through it and no spoilers.
No spoilers. We'll talk about it. We're just going to have to wait. Folks,
you're just going to have to wait.
Do you want to hear me and Zach disagree about The Selfish Gene? If it's going to happen, it's not going to happen here. You're going to have to wait.
Yep.
Who understands it? Who understands it?
So who exactly is it that doesn't understand evolution? No
They
one
do.
has observed evolution in action, and yet countless believers in the story of evolution, both lay people and scientifically literate specialists, claim to have done so. And yet, when pressed, most of the scientists will admit that big picture evolution is not demonstrable, while still
Yes, it is.
citing specific circumstances like new flu bug strains.
No, okay, first of all, things that we have directly observed, the evolution of multicellularity, new organelles, like the evolution of live birth. These are things that we have directly observed in populations where they didn't previously exist. So don't tell me I get really mad about this because that is direct observational science. That things we have directly seen happen. New genes, brand new genes to digest organic molecules that didn't exist 2 centuries ago. Now the enzymes to digest those things exist. Things we have directly observed evolving. Don't tell me it's historical.
Hundreds and hundreds of cases of new genes like that. It baffles me that they can even continue to say that.
Because they're lying to their audience for money.
Also, like, you guys study evolution happening like right now, like contemporarily, but like they just said that you can't demonstrate big picture evolution. Well, you can demonstrate that things happened in the past using historical evidence. Like you can demonstrate.
No, you have to literally witness it, Grayson. That's how science works. If I don't see it with my own 2 eyes, I can't trust that it happened.
Like we have this whole thing. Like first of all, you could demonstrate evolution is 100% true, even if a single fossil had never been formed on Earth and we had no fossils, you could still prove that. But the fact that we have both genetics and the fossil record, and you can make a phylogenetic tree with genetics, and then you can see how that compares to the fossil record, and like you overlap, you see groups arising, like it matches. Like, come on, like the evidence is overwhelming. How could anyone deny any of this if they have? And I don't know if you've shown the video, the title of this video there, but that actually might be the worst part of the whole video because the title claims we have studied evolution in all caps.
In depth.
Like, it's like
It's so bad.
Like, and they're like, we studied this in depth, and the we know that it's not true because we misunderstood this one experiment in the 1950s in a book about it from the 90s, and that's their in-depth study of evolution that they figured out it's not true based on. Like, what?
Counterpoint: have you considered nuh-uh?
Have you considered no you? As a professional debate lord on YouTube, I think that I can, my no you retort is unbeatable. That's just that's how debate works.
Should put that on your resume, professional debate lord.
Pesticide or antibiotic resistance, etc., and toting fancy-sounding mechanisms like genetic drift, non-random mating, speciation, gene flow, founder's theory, etc.
I forgot about this part.
That is my favorite part. Where he's like, those stupid evolutionists citing other mechanisms of evolution.
I want to be very clear here that drift is one syllable. It's not a fancy word. Everybody knows the word drift. I had totally forgotten that this was a thing, but watching this video the first time, it was just like, yeah, those are the other mechanisms. I mean,
I wonder what you think founder's theory is.
Founder effect is a subset of drift, speciation is a result, theory. Not a but like, whatever.
Founder effect.
I can quibble with this list, but like, this is a list of non-selective, like non-natural selection mechanisms of evolution.
Yeah, can I also say that, like, that some of these aren't even mechanisms of evolution. Like founder's theory is just a subset of drift.
That's drift.
Non-random mating, it depends on how you define it. It may or may not be, again,
drift or not. Yeah.
Speciation is not a mechanism.
No, that's a result.
Gene flow is, but they're missing the whole mechanism that they've been like begging for this whole video. Where does new forms come from? Right. That is the mechanism that is not on this list.
Did they even wait? Can we do a transcript search of this video, Dan? Have they even said the word mutation one time?
Maybe at the very beginning when they talked about things getting worse.
I don't even know if they said mutation. I think they just said things get worse.
They may have not said mutation at all.
In their whole video on evolution and like, well, natural selection doesn't create new information. They never mention mutation. They don't even say the word. That's incredible. That's honestly incredible.
That's what blows my mind, that why it doesn't appear on this list, but they thought to add founder's theory. Like, why put founder's theory if I'm not going to put mutation? I don't.
They were like really scraping the bottom of the barrel with founder's theory.
Yeah.
Like, no, we can't include mutation. In this entire video, we cannot even acknowledge that mutations happen.
Yeah.
All right. For whatever reason, the transcript is not showing up for me, but I think y'all are right, which is ridiculous.
It's so sad. They made a whole video about evolution and didn't even say the word.
Didn't even mention, and then they listed a bunch of other ones.
This is the result of him studying evolution in depth. Right. And like, he has not even said the other mechanisms of evolution. Right. Like, literally not even said them.
When I just did this like 2 weeks ago in class, we talk about Hardy-Weinberg, and then we talk about like the conditions for Hardy-Weinberg, and then the mechanisms of evolution, because that's a one-to-one for if you don't meet the conditions, evolution is occurring. And I do this fun finger thing, and I'm going to share it with everybody now because I've got 100 of you all here. I don't know why, but here you are. So we're going to do the finger thing. And Zach, I apologize, but we are considering non-random mating a mechanism for the purposes of this demonstration.
Yeah.
And
it's like, Soul Right is the one to argue with, but go ahead.
Right. So it's thumbs up for natural selection. Natural selection because you get better, right? Adaptations, right? And then your index finger, your pointer is gene flow because you go over there, migration. And then you got M for mutation. You could also do it the other way because mutations could be bad. That works too. They like that one. Ring finger.
It's a wumbo.
Ring finger for non-random mating, right? like that. And then your pinky finger, this one's a stretch. The pinky finger, smallest finger for genetic drift because it's strongest in small populations, right? So you get your 5 mechanisms of evolution. If I was grading this, they got drift, they got non-random mating, they got gene flow, they got 3 out of 5. They got 3 out of 5.
100 million genetic drift.
Just like, what are we doing here? I like that too. That's a deep cut. We're old.
We are old.
I guarantee you 90% of my students have not seen that movie and have no idea what you're doing.
Oh.
You have no idea how young they are, Grayson. You have no idea. Let us continue. We're almost done.
All fall under the umbrella of examples of natural selection or of defective genetic mutations.
Oh, there he goes.
There, he said mutation, but it wasn't a mechanism of evolution. What are we doing? What are we doing?
Ever been observed to evolve anything?
What?
No, we understand what evolution is supposed to be and to be able to do. It's just that none of the things that evolutionists point to as evidence for evolution actually accomplish what evolution is supposed to. None of these examples ever create anything new. They just demonstrate.
We've literally seen new things. We've literally seen new things. The example you gave, the peppered moths, it was literally a new phenotype that didn't exist. And we understand now in the 21st century the genetics of what caused the new.
Okay, Dan, before you blow a gasket here,
Yeah,
I want to spitball because I feel like we could literally spend like an hour just constantly naming mutations that have
new stuff,
new beneficial information. Like we could literally just spend an hour coming up with counterexamples that he just said don't exist. But there's one that I've just thought about yesterday, and I haven't gotten to try it out on a creationist yet to see what they say. So I'm curious. I want to get your thoughts because I don't think I've ever heard this example being brought up, because usually every time I bring up an example, like I'll bring up nyelinase. Hey, that's a totally new class of enzymes that didn't exist before nylon. Like, come on. And they'll be, oh, well, it's still a single-celled organism. They didn't grow a new feature. Then I'm like, okay, well, what about like the humans that have mutations where they're born with tails? Is that a new enough anatomical feature for you? A freaking tail? And they're like, oh, that's not a real tail because it's not prehensile and it doesn't have like right. I'm like, okay, you're just gonna keep moving the goalpost. Fine. And then I'll bring up tetrachromacy. Hey, it's a mutation that literally lets you see hundreds of new colors that you couldn't see before. Isn't that new information? Oh, but that only affects women, so it doesn't count. And then like I always am hearing all this pushback, and they're like, we want a new anatomical feature that changes an organism's body plan that arose from a mutation that could not have been in the ancestors or whatever. And so I was thinking about this. I'm like, what is something that even the creationists will have to acknowledge that fits that criteria? And I think I came up with one, and I haven't gotten to use it yet. So I want your thoughts on this tonight. But you guys know, like from the famous scene in Jurassic Park, like that, like the frill dinosaur they have here based on like the frill lizard.
Yeah.
The frill, that's 100% a new anatomic feature, even to the most ardent creationists. They couldn't say, that's not a new body part. That didn't change the body plan.
Triceratops had that. No, that's not new. Triceratops had that.
And I want to say, dang, you might have just totally got the steam out of my sails. But here, they believe,
no. Those are different groups of dinosaurs because Triceratops is an ornithishine dinosaur, and the frilly thing was a saurischian. I'm not saying dinosaur, the frill dinosaurs. Two different groups.
I'm saying the actual frilled lizards that exist today in Australia, and you can find them today. Because they believe that all lizards came from the same like lizard kind or whatever. Right. I don't know how many lizard kinds are in the Baraminology records or whatever.
Not that many. Yeah.
The frilled lizards are the only genus and species of lizard that have those frills on Earth today that I'm aware of. And so that is a new feature that the creationists themselves would have to admit evolved, because they believe like, oh, we believe in microevolution from the kinds from Noah's Ark. It's like, okay, so that original lizard kind did not have the genes for the frill because no other lizards of that descended from.
They're just going to say they all had it initially and everyone lost it except for the ones that still have it.
Every single species of lizard lost it except for one.
I think you're fighting a losing battle here, right? Because they're just going to keep shifting the goalpost.
That's what they say about there's lizards with placentas too, and they say the same thing, that the common ancestor from the Ark would have had a placenta and all the rest lost it for some reason. Yeah.
But like
Yeah,
we
same thing.
can see all the other lizards do not have the genes for the big frill, which is a new anatomical feature. Like that they believe in their own worldview that had to arise from mutation, unless it's just the biggest coincidence in the entire world, and every other species of lizard just happened to lose it because Eve ate some fruit or something. Like, God. Anyways, okay. Now I thought I had this cool new example that I was excited to try out, and now like you guys have prepped me to just expect.
Just be ready. Just be ready to be appalled.
Triceratops. That's a triceratops.
Be ready for it.
Yeah, they'll be like, oh, chameleons.
We're back. By the way, we're back to the dogs at a board meeting. Just
why not just have the dogs playing poker? Like, would be a fun reference.
Because I think they're supposed to be us. They're supposed to be us sitting around discussing evolution.
And there are 3 of them. Wow, and there's 3 of us.
And here's the thing: 2 of them are wearing bow ties, which is not appropriate for a business meeting.
Yeah, but Bill Nye taught me that scientists wear those.
Which is why I think this is making fun of the scientists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is just stock footage. Just like they just ripped this from somewhere. They didn't make the bow ties.
That's true.
Reshuffled varieties or broken and damaged versions of what already existed.
Poor dog.
It's so cute.
What the story of evolution actually depends on is an impressive amount of imagination, not observational science. And if you listen carefully, you'll hear it constantly in their explanations of how this supposedly turned into that over millions of years, and yet no one has ever observed anything close to that occurring.
We literally have observed the evolution of multicellular in the lab. We've literally seen things go from unicellular to multicellular.
Multiple times with multiple species, like with Chlamydomonas, E. coli. We've done it with lots of different types.
Yes,
it also just doesn't matter. Like science is not based on what you see with your eyeballs. Nobody's observed an atom. Nobody's ever seen, like Uranus go all the way around the sun. Like these sorts of things.
I used that example yesterday with Kent Hovind, but I just gotta give credit where credit's due. It was Mark Reed that came up with that example.
That's a great example.
It's like really no one has observed many things, right? But that's not, science is not based on like seeing it with your eyeballs, right? We can infer these things from the data at hand. It's just preposterous that they again, it's like they will always just move the goalpost. We can show the evolution of any new feature and they'll be like, but I didn't see a microbe become a man. Mm-hmm. Like they will always just push it further and further.
Yeah.
I literally talked to a creationist the other day. Also, the first creationist I've ever talked to in my entire life who actually admitted halfway through the debate, he said, "You won this debate, Grayson." I was shocked. I didn't know how to act.
Congratulations. You, sir, have won the internet. That is it. Retire. You've won the internet.
It's all downhill from there.
I was like, what? And he said, "No, you won the debate, Grayson." Like, I'm like, wait, is this a trap? I was like, is this a new debate technique that I didn't know about? But okay, earlier in that debate, before I won, he had said that he doesn't believe that a tree could give birth to a monkey. I'm like, me neither, dude.
I don't either.
Like, I'm like,
trees don't have uteruses. They can't give birth to anything.
That's like such a level of misunderstanding of just like basic biology. Like, I don't even know how to start talking to that. Like I don't even know where to go from there.
Yeah, it's like, are we sure that we all are on the same page about what trees and monkeys are?
Like, yeah.
No, we are not.
Well, I'm not sure. Like, yeah, like I don't know where to begin here.
Yeah. I can't fix that. I got nothing.
Now, at this point in the argument, many evolutionists often retreat to elephant hurling, claiming that if creationists took into account the entire body of evidence from the fossil record, the geologic column, DNA studies, ape-man skulls, dinosaurs, etc., and put it all together, then we'd understand the evidence for evolution is simply overwhelming. Mm-hmm. As the famous atheistic...
Just want to say, yes, because what creationists do is they'll say, look at this one thing. It doesn't prove everything. And then we go, that's because there's all these other things. And they go, elephant hurling, too much evidence at once. Yes. Sorry. I don't know what.
Is that a phrase? Have you guys heard?
Yeah, I've heard that before. I've encountered that before.
I Googled this, like this elephant hurling thing, and I was like, what is, and the only people I've ever seen use it is creationist. Like, it's those creationist websites all the way down. So I think it's a thing they actually invented. I've never, like, it's not like a logical fallacy or something that's like has any formal meaning.
I think the first person I heard it from was actually Paul Price.
Okay, so that makes sense. That tracks.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a part of the Bible, thou shalt not hurtest thy elephant.
Professor Richard Dawkins once said,
oh, here we go.
Nobody has actually seen evolution take place over a long period, but they have seen the after effects, and the after effects are massively supported. It's like a case in a court of law where nobody can actually stand up and say, I saw the murder happen, and yet you've got millions and millions of pieces of evidence which no reasonable person can possibly dispute.
I just want to point out that he's using this quote as an argument against evolution.
Right?
And I don't know if that's a great tactic.
Also, like the phrase over a long period in this quote is doing some seriously heavy lifting.
Yeah, it's Atlas over there, right? That phrase is doing all the work right there.
Yeah, because like the creationist, like the guy reading this, he just wanted to like not emphasize that part of the quote at all. But that's like the entire quote relies on that over a long period thing.
It's just literally we have finite lifespans.
Yes.
Therefore.
It's like if you change this, like nobody has actually seen evolution take place over millions of years. Like, I wonder why that could be.
Yeah. Yeah.
See what he's claiming? Well, yes, just like the hypothetical murder, no one has observed evolution, but all of the individual pieces.
I just want the audience to see the bait and switch there, because he went from evolution over long periods of time versus evolution, period. Those two things do not mean the same thing. This dude is lying to his audience.
Yeah, remember, this is not just ignorance. He has studied evolution in depth.
Evidence can't be disputed, and yet all of them can be, and usually quite easily at that. Upon close examination, each and every piece of evidence, each individual example used to promote it, falls apart. In order to create the appearance of the story of evolution,
Haeckel's embryos, drink. Don't actually, if you don't, just drink responsibly. Here it is.
As having some semblance of credibility, evolutionists sometimes water down the definition to the point that it seems any change in living things, past or present, can be co-opted into the definition. A perfect example is the definition of evolution used by Dr. Eugenie Scott, former executive director of the rather pretentious sounding and evolution defending National Center for Science Education.
What's the name of his organization, real quick?
Yeah, I don't know, but it's certainly not pretentious.
Yeah, like this guy say something smug or pretentious? No, it's gotta be very humble, I'm sure, not just like the Canada Center of Intelligent Design or anything.
Notice her target audience when using the definition. The big idea is that living things, species, are related to one another through common ancestry from earlier forms that differed from them. Darwin called this descent with modification, and it is still the best definition of evolution we can use, especially with members of the general public and with young learners. Of course.
Yeah, because you know what that definition doesn't require? Math. Yeah, descent with modification is the not math version of change in allele frequencies over generations. Those two things mean the same thing, but the more technical modern definition can be expressed mathematically. Like
he's literally about to get mad at her saying that, hey, we should teach things to kids that are easy to understand.
Yeah.
You're going to see as we go through this video, but I just want everybody to appreciate how close he's going to get to the G word here, by which I of course mean grooming, is what he's like, oh, they're indoctrinated. We've gone straight past indoctrination. We all know the culture war stuff with AIG. Like that's the dog whistle we're blowing into here.
Teaching kids
under
science?
This definition.
In
addition,
simple
the very
words?
act of procreation between sexually reproducing organisms could be dubbed as evidence of evolution, because the offspring of all living things are obviously related to their ancestors and differ from them to some degree.
Yes.
No wonder the average person that evolutionists like Scott are targeting doesn't understand evolution. If virtually
This
any
is an
change
important
in living
distinction
things
here, though, and the difference between parents and offspring is not evolution, because individuals don't evolve. We're talking about changes in populations. And this is why the technical definition matters so much, right? Is because descent with modification, the way Darwin thought about evolution, the way people in the 1800s thought about evolution, they thought individuals actually did evolve to some degree, right? Like they did not have the conception of population biology, because that just didn't exist at that time. Like population biology didn't come around until the early 1900s, right? It was actually like Francis Galton and Carl Pearson and some of those others that knew Darwin and were associated with Darwin, but they were the ones that took the ideas of descent with modification and made it population biology. And yeah, it's individuals do not evolve. So the difference between parents and offspring is not evolution, because you have to change the frequencies in the population. It's not just about a given individual.
Can be cited as proof of evolution, of course the average young person will grow up thinking that the so-called evidence for it is overwhelming. And no wonder so many of them keep showing up in our comment section saying, you just don't understand evolution. However, as far as those at Answers in Genesis, it's not that we don't believe in evolution because we don't understand it. We don't believe in evolution because we do understand it. And we want to help educate as many people as we can as to why the story of evolution simply doesn't hold up scientifically, and certainly not biblically in any way whatsoever.
I just want to thank Calvin Smith, just right at the end there, for answering the age-old question when it comes to AIG. Are we ignorant or are we liars? Coming down strong on the we're liars side.
There's your answer
of the question. There we go. I think that's it. We don't have any. Yeah, that's the end.
I love how I tried to attack evolutionary scientists by saying, yeah, isn't it funny how their target audience for trying to teach evolution is people that don't understand evolution? It's like, yeah, that's what teaching is, dude.
That's
you teach. Like, why would you teach things if the people already know those things before you teach them? Like, what? And then he just, like, in the very next sentence, after casting shade for them for going after young people that don't understand evolution, they're like, that's why we here at AIG work tirelessly to try to tell our followers and children that evolution isn't true. It's like, yeah, the pot's calling the kettle black. The call's coming from inside the house, Stuart. Or whatever this guy's name is, I forget.
Calvin Smith.
Oh,
Calvin Smith.
Yeah,
that's a made-up name. You can't tell me otherwise.
I'm particularly frustrated by Calvin for many reasons. Like the smugness is obviously just like infuriating, because smug people just get on my nerves. But like what's even worse about him is that he constantly like insinuates that we are just lying. That like the evolutionary biologists are fudging their data.
We know better.
Like that gets under my skin so hard. Like when I see creationists do that kind of thing, it's like, you really don't understand why we do this. Like, you don't understand how like serious we are about science. Like, I don't know about how much money y'all make. I don't get paid very much. I got into this field because I love science and I love evolution. That's why I do it. If I was going to do something and like that required me to like lie and cheat and steal and stuff like I don't know, I would have gotten into a different profession, right? Like this would not have been what I would have gone into.
My dignity is worth more than what academia pays.
No, exactly. like I do not get paid enough to throw away my dignity.
Have some self-respect, okay? My dignity is not worth the money that academia is willing to pay for it. All right.
Very true. Very true. And it just aggravates me because it's such a personal attack. You know, it's like, you're talking about people that like I care about dearly, that like I've seen them struggle. I've seen them like start experiments that failed, and then they had to like try to figure out what they were going to do next. Like it's hard. Like science is not easy. This is a freaking hard thing to do. and people go through a lot of stress and they'll have a lot of issues with it. And so like to just like cast all that aside as if we're just fudging our data, like you have no idea how much blood, sweat, and tears goes into every paper we write, you know, like how much goes into every experiment we carry out. Like this is a hard field, and like, I don't know, like at least respect your interlocutor, you know?
I mean, both of you could make so much more money if you were actually liars, because you could just say, hey, I studied evolution and then I learned it's not true. And then you can make a video just like this one and make way more money.
Zach, you know what we should do? We should basically start like a bro podcast of like the from the inside of science. That we could do like the right-wing podcast circuit. Yeah, we could get on all the, you know, and just like sell out and just be like professional speakers for a few years and just like make bank.
Oh, Joe Rogan would love you guys.
That would make so much more money than what we actually do for a living.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people like this.
We should call Barry Weiss and get jobs down at University of Austin, the fake unaccredited university, and because we could sell out and be truth tellers. Yeah. I bet we'd make more money than we make now.
Honestly, it would probably be like it would be such a news event, Dan, if you went and worked with Jeanson. You're like, I've seen the like. Jeanson,
AIG.
I want to start working on his work in his lab.
Ken, speaking to Ken Ham right now, Ken, there is a number that would cause me to sell out. I will tell a good story. Let's chat. There is a number that would cause me to do that. Let's chat.
It would be such a good story, right? Like you've done so much debates and debunks and stuff, like famous atheist YouTuber converts to like it would be such a great story. They would.
I think that you should keep it going, like keep the grift going until you get onto a platform. Like if you did this, I think it's safe to say it's inevitable that Joe Rogan will invite you on his podcast, and when you are on Joe Rogan, that's when you drop the facade, and that's when you do the reveal. Yeah. It'd be great.
And then plot twist. That's how Joe Rogan gets his I don't know what's the journalism prize? The guy
Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah, that's how Joe Rogan gets his Pulitzer. Yeah, it's like right.
You know what? Honestly, the way the world's heading, I think we're only
got to play the long game.
Joe Rogan getting a Pulitzer.
You got to play the long game. Look, weirder things have happened in the last 8 years. Okay, you got to play the long game here, folks. You got to play.
And it would be like such a good point too about like how poorly we get paid, right? You could be like, I decided to demonstrate, just how poor, how little scientists are respected and paid, and so I lied for a few years, made a crap ton of money, and then now I'm revealing to you, if you want good scientists that will like tell the truth and like stick around and blah blah. Pay us more, man.
Because otherwise more people are going to do what I just did. Yeah, right.
He's such a legend for that.
Man, legend. I mean, obviously we are, just us and 100 of our friends talking about this, publicly to the whole world. So we can't, we got
dang it, where was our smoke-filled room and all the cigars?
Yeah.
All right, folks, it has been approximately 2 hours since we started this journey, and our blood pressure is collectively a hell of a lot higher than it was when we began. So I think we're going to call it a night here. Grayson, what do you have coming down the pike?
So I think on Friday, I'm going to be uploading my video detailing like basically the entire evolution of God. So from pre-humans to like an agent detection schemes in the brain, all the way through like the Second Temple period and the birth of Christianity and Islam and all that. And I'm just going to cover the history of all that. And I've got another fun historical video that ties into archaeogenetics because I will be debunking Yaqub. Do you guys know about Yaqub?
I don't think I do.
So the Nation of Islam has an official canon that white people are a genetic creation.
Oh, I have heard of this. Yes.
Yeah. There was a super genius named Yaqub back in the day who literally created white people in his laboratory. And so I'm going to be going over the Yaqub myth, and then I'm going to go to the actual archaeogenetics about like, hey, like some of the genes that are responsible for the modern European phenotype that we commonly think of as white people, even though like race is not genetically real. have these genes for their skin color or these genes for their eyes, and here's the origin of these genes that we found through archaeogenetics, and just go through the actual science, because I don't think this is going to be spoiling the video, but there was no super genius Yakub that created white people in his lab. Sorry.
Not a real thing?
Not a real thing. I'm sorry to burst your
There you
bubble.
go.
Spoilers, man.
Yeah.
All right, I'm looking forward to that stuff. Zach, in addition to your third way video that we'll see eventually, what else do you have coming up?
Yeah,
what's on your
so I've got a couple of things I'm really excited about. So the thing that's going to come out the soonest, as in maybe even this weekend, early next week, is a thing I've been working on for a long time, is on the hereditarianism and the hereditarian fallacy. And so for those of you that may not know about hereditarianism, it's the idea that all variation in humans are dictated by your genes. So why do humans act differently? Why are there different cultures? Why are there poor people and rich people? Like every difference in humans are determined by your underlying genetics. I've made, the video's been made. I'm just finishing up doing the editing on it now. It's a combination of the history of the idea and then also a lot of quantitative genetics. Like we're going to go through how you estimate heritability, what heritability means. We're going to talk about selection on quantitative traits. Like it's a deep dive into quantitative genetics. So yeah, so that's the one that's going to be coming out the soonest. As Dan said, I'm also working on a third way video. And then one other thing I got a script that I'm working on now is about species concepts and speciation. It is I'm dubbing this a kind of tribute to Ernst Mayr. I believe I'm probably in the minority among the science friends, and that I think species are real things. And
Lies.
so this is a video.
Lies.
This is a video where I am going to lay out my argument as to why species are real things.
You know what we should do at some point? I should host a debate between you and Jackson, and that'll be Jackson Wheat, and that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would actually love to do that.
That would be super
cool. I would love to do that. I think that I'm going to do it in both sort, because as I often do, I like the historical component and then how we actually apply it to modern science.
You should also trash talk the science friends on the DL in this video.
I'm not so like y'all have made videos on this. Like I could technically go to like yours and like Erica, and I could like
you could totally do it. I don't think I've specifically made a video on that, but I've mentioned it. I think Erica has and Jackson has. So yeah. I definitely have seen Erica's. I think I've seen Jackson's as well. But yeah, so I know that there is perspectives out there that are different than mine. So I want to argue why I think species are real things, and I'm going to do it through sort of a biographical take on Ernst Mayr, who's one of the most famous evolutionary biologists. He is the one that gave us the species concepts that we all know and love, as well as incorporated systematics into evolution. So he's a really, really important character. That's what I've got coming up.
Nice.
I just want to, before we go, I just want to say, Zach, you'll appreciate this. Grayson, you will too, but Zach specifically because of what you just said. My colleague, it wasn't in my specific section of my class, but a different section that my colleague teaches. This was a bunch of years ago now. She had a student who said that her great uncle was a biologist, and her parents or whatever had a bunch of his notebooks, and talking specifically about like species concepts and ecology, and like it was really cool because her parents had always told her about, your uncle, he was invited, did all this stuff. Her uncle was Ernst Mayr.
Oh my gosh, that is just
her
so cool.
great uncle. Her great uncle.
Yeah, so the guy lived to almost 100 years old. Yeah. He lived for so long. I mean, think of the world of Ernst Mayr. Like when he was born, they were still fighting about Mendelian genetics, and by the time he died, we'd sequenced the human genome. It's just like the man had seen so much.
Yeah,
wow, that's awesome.
That's so so next week I'm going to rebroadcast a video of a really fun chat I had with Mark Reed not that long ago, and then soon I'm going to rebroadcast a really fun chat I had with Grayson recently. We did a freaking Nathaniel Jeanson video over on Grayson's channel, which again, Grayson and Zach are both linked below, so check that out. And then I have in various stages of completion, none of these are yet recorded, but I have a couple of creation myths and a couple of creation trick videos that I'm really looking forward to that some of them I've outlined, some of them I've got slides for. I just haven't gotten around to recording any of this stuff because this semester is kicking my butt. So folks may have realized, or you may have noticed, that a bunch of my stuff has been either live shows or rebroadcasts lately. And that's because I haven't had time to like make videos for a while because this semester has been extraordinarily busy. So I promise I will get to that stuff soon. It may take until 2025, and that's okay. I haven't decided if I'm going to take a little break yet, but some of you may remember that way back at the beginning of the year, I said I was going to do a weekly video all year, every week, and I have yet to miss a week, and it's almost December, and I have 4 weeks left, and I've got 2 videos already lined up with the Mark chat and the Grayson video. So I think we're going to do it, folks. I think we're going to do it.
For those of you listening that are not YouTube content creators, like, let me just say, as someone that makes videos on YouTube, like, that is so impressive. Like, to put out a video every single week without missing one, like, I bow to you, Dan.
I don't know how the people who do it for real do it. I don't know how they do it because, man, some weeks I'm just like, I don't know. I'm going to do my real job on air for 30 minutes because I have nothing better to do. Like, I don't know. Yeah. And that's fine. It's all good. So I've got fun stuff coming up. I promise I'm going to get to this stuff eventually. I can't promise when I'm going to get to it, but I will get to it. So thank you, everybody, for being here and hanging out. At multiple times tonight, I saw in the little view thing that there were over 100 people here watching us just complain about creationists while nerding out about actual evolutionary biology with just makes me so happy. So thank you all for being here. Please remember, in order of descending priority, 1, go into the description. If you're not subscribed to Grayson and Zach, click on those links and subscribe to those channels. Also, I'm assuming if you're watching this, you're more than likely already subscribed here, but if you're not, hit the subscribe button here too. Hit the like button, leave a comment, share the video, do, all the algorithm friendly things because our lives are increasingly governed by capital T, capital A, the algorithm. So I hope everybody, if you are in the United States and you're celebrating Thanksgiving this weekend, I hope you have a lovely and happy holidays and you don't have too many Trump voters in your family that you have to deal with at dinner. Have a good night, everybody. I will see you down the road. And once again, one more time, remember to subscribe to my wonderful guests. Good night, everyone. See you next time.